My name is Sarah Mitchell. I am 26 years old. 3 hours after I gave my half-sister my left kidney, my father walked into my hospital room carrying a black garbage bag. He slammed it against the bed rail so hard the IV pole rattled. His face was a mask I had not seen before, cold and finished, the way a man looks when he has collected the last thing he needed from a place he never intended to return to. He said, "You've done your part. Pack your things and come back. We don't need you anymore." My stepmother Linda was standing just behind his left shoulder, her phone raised at chest height, the red recording light already on. She adjusted her angle slightly to catch the window light. She did not lower the phone. She did not look at me. She looked at the frame. My half-sister Brianna, 20 years old and recovering 1 floor above us in the transplant unit, had already received her gift. While I was still on the operating table, my father and stepmother had left the hospital, driven to the Cartier boutique on West End Avenue in Nashville, and purchased a $9,200 diamond bangle they were calling her survivor bracelet. They had posted it to Linda's account before I was out of the recovery bay. None of them thanked me. Not one of them met my eyes. I whispered through the post-surgical pain, through the rawness in my throat where the breathing tube had been, through the fog of the morphine drip. I said, "I just gave her my kidney." My father laughed. It was the short, dismissive laugh he used with people he considered beneath negotiation. "That's the only valuable thing you ever had," he said. "Now you're useless." They turned toward the door. Linda was still filming. The door was still swinging when Dr. Nathan Waldwell, my transplant surgeon, stepped through it from the hallway. He was holding a thick manila folder in one hand. He did not look at me first. He looked at my father's retreating back. He said quietly, with the kind of precision that does not require volume, "Mr. Mitchell, I need you to stay right there. We need to have a conversation about whose signature is actually on your daughter's consent documents." My father stopped walking. Linda's phone dipped. The red light flickered. They had no idea that the story they had been carefully building for 287,000 followers was about to be taken apart, document by document, in a hallway of Vanderbilt Medical Center on a Tuesday afternoon in February, while the morphine pump clicked softly, and I counted the ceiling tiles above my bed for the 3rd time. Let me go back to the beginning, because this story does not make sense without it. My mother was Carol Lynn Mitchell. She taught songwriting at a small performing arts school in Franklin, Tennessee for 16 years. She wrote her own songs on yellow legal pads at the kitchen table. She played guitar with her eyes closed. She hummed while she cooked. She had a voice that sounded like it belonged to someone who had survived something and decided to keep going anyway. She taught me that the silence between notes was just as important as the sound. She was 44 years old when she died of ovarian cancer in the summer of 2016. I was 18. She had been sick for nearly 3 years before that. She refused to tell anyone except my father how serious it was, because she believed genuinely and stubbornly that protecting the people you love from pain was its own kind of love. She was wrong about that, but I understood why she believed it. Her best friend, Linda Hargrove, came to the funeral in a black dress that was not appropriate for the occasion, and held my father's arm with both hands. She cried in the front pew. She told me at the reception that she was going to be there for me, whatever I needed, whatever it took. 10 months later, she married my father in our backyard. I was 9. I stood next to her in a champagne-colored bridesmaid dress my mother would have returned immediately. I smiled when the photographer told me to. That photo became the most shared post Linda had ever made on her account at the time. My mother's younger sister, Aunt Claire, who lived in Knoxville and had been my mother's closest confidant for their entire adult lives, was not invited to the wedding. She called me that night. I let it go to voicemail. I have thought about that voicemail every single day for the past several years. She said, "Sarah, sweetheart, I just need to hear that you're okay. Please call me when you can." I did not call her back. I was 19, living in a house that had become a performance, and I did not yet understand that avoiding Aunt Claire was the first brick in a wall I was building around myself on someone else's instructions. Linda brought her daughter Brianna into our home. Brianna was 13. She was already very thin.
She already had the careful, watchful eyes of a child who has been photographed since before she could ask why. She understood angles before she understood algebra. The first morning Linda lived in our house, she came downstairs wearing my mother's favorite cardigan, the soft gray one with the fraying left sleeve that my mother had owned since graduate school. She poured coffee and leaned against the counter and said, "Carol wouldn't want this just gathering dust, would she?" I said nothing. That was the first lesson I learned about surviving in my own home. Say nothing. My father moved my mother's guitars to the garage 6 weeks later. Linda thought the walls would look better with gallery mirrors. I helped carry the smaller guitar case. I did not say a word. By 2020, Linda had quit her job in medical device sales and launched an Instagram account called Linda Hargrove Life. Her opening post was a flat lay of my mother's cardigan on a white linen background, with the caption, "Healing Season, wearing what a late dear friend left behind. Grief is just love that has nowhere to go." My mother had never given her that cardigan. The account reached 4,000 followers in its first month. The brand was called Blended Family Healing. The hashtag was #BlendedBlessings. Linda wrote captions about my grace, my resilience, my willingness to open my arms to a new family. She wrote about how beautifully our broken pieces had fit back together. She had never shown me a single caption before it went live. I did not exist in her brand, except as a narrative device, cropped just outside the frame, present enough to make the story credible, and absent enough not to require my permission. In 2023, when I turned 22, I moved out. I rented a studio apartment in East Nashville and began taking freelance graphic design clients. For the first time since my mother died, I had a door that locked from the inside and a key that only I held. I thought I had finally gotten free. I had only stepped out of the camera's reach for a while. The phone call that changed everything came on a Wednesday afternoon in early December 2025. I was sitting at my kitchen table, working on a logo for a small coffee roastery on Gallatin Avenue, when Linda's name appeared on my screen. She had not called me in 8 months. I almost did not answer. Her voice was already shaking before she finished saying my name. "Honey," she said, "I know we haven't been as close as we should be. I know a lot of that is my fault. But Brianna is dying. The doctors at Vanderbilt are saying a living donor is the only real option. And Sarah, you are the only match they found in the family. Please." I sat very still at my kitchen table. The logo on my screen blurred slightly. "What's wrong with her kidneys?" I asked. Linda told me about a rare autoimmune condition, something the doctors were still trying to fully classify, something that had slowly destroyed Brianna's kidney function over the past 2 years. Her voice broke on the word 2 years, in a way that sounded rehearsed. She said, "Please, just come to dinner Sunday, just to talk. No pressure, I promise. Just come and see her." I went to dinner on Sunday. My father cooked. He had not cooked since before my mother died. He made something close to my mother's pot roast recipe. Close, but wrong in 3 specific ways that I could not stop noticing. Linda met me at the door with a glass of red wine and pressed it into my hand before I had taken my coat off. Brianna sat at the far end of the table. She was so thin that the oversized sweater she wore looked suspended in midair above her chair. Her wrists on the tablecloth were narrower than anything I remembered. She did not look up when I sat down. My father served food onto my plate. He looked up at me with wet eyes, the kind of careful tears that powerful men deploy when they need something they cannot simply demand. He said, "Sarah Bear," he had not called me that since the summer my mother died, "you have always been the strong one in this family. We need our strong girl." After dinner, Linda pulled me out to the back porch. The December air in Franklin was sharp and cold. She wrapped her arms around herself and looked up at the sky and took a breath that she clearly wanted me to notice. Then she said, "I have a proposal. You give Brianna her life back, and in return, I give you the platform you have been building toward for years." She told me about her account. 291,000 followers, a podcast with 40,000 monthly listeners, brand partnerships with 8 wellness companies, 3 of which had been actively asking her about her extended family network. She said, "One post after recovery, tagged from my account to everyone who follows me.
An introduction to every wellness brand in my circle. A podcast feature on what it means to give life to someone you love. By summer, you'd have your own studio, your own client list. You wouldn't have to freelance anymore." She pulled a cocktail napkin from the pocket of her coat. She had written 3 items on it in looping, careful handwriting. Item 1, tagged recovery post. Item 2, brand network introduction. Item 3, podcast feature episode. There was no signature. There was no date. She held it out to me. "We don't need a contract," she said, before I could ask. "Or family." I drove home with the napkin folded in my coat pocket. I sat in my car in the parking lot of my apartment building for 47 minutes without going inside. I thought about Brianna's wrists on the tablecloth. I thought about my mother saying once that taking care of people was the most important thing a human being could do. I thought about having my own studio. I thought about being called Sarah Bear. I called Linda the next morning and said yes. I want to be honest about this. No one forced me. No one held anything over my head in terms I could clearly name. When the social worker at Vanderbilt Medical Center asked me 3 separate times, in 3 separate appointments, whether I was feeling any family pressure to donate, I said no each time. I checked the box marked "No coercion present" on the psychological evaluation form. I believed I was telling the truth. Coercion is a word that becomes very difficult to recognize when it arrives wearing the face of a father who hasn't called you by a childhood nickname in 8 years. The screening process took 6 weeks. Blood panels, CT imaging, a full nephrology consultation, 2 psychological evaluations conducted by separate clinicians, a cardiac workup, a dietary assessment. The night before surgery, my closest friend Megan Torres sent me a text from her apartment across town. Megan was the only person I had told. "Are you absolutely sure about this, Sarah?" I read it twice. I did not respond. I set an alarm for 4:45 in the morning, turned off the lamp, and stared at the ceiling until I fell asleep. I drove myself to Vanderbilt Medical Center at 5:10 on the morning of February 17, 2026. My father had told me 4 times over the previous 3 weeks that he would drive me. He did not show up. He and Linda arrived 45 minutes after I did, walking Brianna in on a wheelchair, accompanied by a photographer I had never seen before, a young man with a camera rig and a portable softbox, who turned out to be a content creator Linda had contracted to document what she was calling the family's most courageous day. I was in a paper gown in the pre-op holding bay with an IV already in my hand when I noticed he was pointing his camera toward the foot of my gurney. I looked at Linda. She smiled and said, "He's just here for the memories, honey." At 6:07 that morning, my phone buzzed on the tray beside me. Megan had sent a screenshot. It was a post from Linda Hargrove Life, timestamped 4 minutes earlier. The photo showed Brianna's empty hospital bracelet against a white hospital pillow. The caption read, "Our anonymous angel donor is already in pre-op. She has asked that we honor her privacy. We will carry her courage with us forever. Hashtag anonymous angel, hashtag Brianna Strong, hashtag living donor." I had never asked to be anonymous. I had never been asked whether I wanted to be anonymous. I had never been consulted about this post in any form. Megan's follow-up text arrived before I finished reading the caption. It said, "Katie, what? You're listed as anonymous. Did you agree to this?" I started typing back that I had not. I had not finished the sentence when a man in scrubs and a navy fleece pushed open the curtain of my bay. His ID badge read Nathan Caldwell, MD, transplant surgery. He was perhaps 50, with gray at his temples and the unhurried eyes of someone who has learned that urgency and calm are not opposites. He looked at the photographer standing near the door. He looked at my father standing beside the gurney, holding it casually, as though it were a car he was considering purchasing. He said, in a voice that was very even and not remotely negotiable, "Family to the waiting area, please. Donor and clinical team only from this point." The photographer left. My father took a half-second too long to follow, which Dr. Caldwell noticed without changing his expression. Then he pulled a rolling stool beside my gurney, sat down, and opened a manila folder on his knee. He looked at me without the folder. "Ms. Mitchell," he said. "Before we proceed this morning, I need to verify something about your intake paperwork." He placed 2 documents side by side on the gurney beside my hip. Both were titled Donor Information Sharing and Media Authorization. Both carried my printed name at the top. Both were dated differently. The signature on the January form slanted left and was mine. I recognized it because I remembered laughing with the intake coordinator about my handwriting looking like a seismic reading. The signature on the February form slanted right. "The January form," he said, pointing to the first, "designates your emergency contact as Megan Torres and authorizes information sharing only with her. The February form, submitted by your father 3 weeks ago, designates Robert and Linda Mitchell as your information sharing partners and authorizes use of your name, image, and medical information in family communications. Miss Mitchell, did you sign the February form?" I looked at the signature that slanted right. "No," I said. He nodded once, slowly, as if he had expected this answer and was simply confirming it. He returned both documents to the folder. He made a single written note in my chart. Then he looked up.
"Your surgical consent is completely valid," he said. "We will proceed, but I am flagging this to our ethics board today, and when you wake up, please do not sign any additional documents without me present. Can you promise me that?" I said yes. He stood. He paused at the edge of my bay. "Is there anyone in this hospital today who is here for you specifically?" I thought about Megan, who had offered to drive down, and whom I had told not to bother. I shook my head. "Then I will be," he said, and pulled the curtain closed behind him. The anesthesiologist arrived. The countdown began. The lights softened and blurred. The last thing I thought before the white came was that I had forgotten to text Megan back. Surgery concluded at 11:14 in the morning. I was in the post-anesthesia care unit for 95 minutes. I was transferred to room 407 South at 12:51 in the afternoon. I woke in stages, the way you do when your body is deciding whether to fully return. The ceiling above me had 38 acoustic tiles. I counted them twice, because my eyes were not yet cooperating with the rest of me. The chair beside my bed was empty. My father had told me, on at least 5 separate occasions over the preceding weeks, that he would be there when I opened my eyes. The chair was a standard hospital chair, in blue upholstered vinyl, and it was completely, absolutely empty. The door opened and a nurse came in. Her name tag read Patricia Reeves, RN. She was perhaps 55, broad-shouldered, with a steady efficiency that left no space for performance. She checked my IV line and the morphine pump, and then looked at me with the careful, non-invasive directness of someone who has spent decades reading patients without asking them to explain themselves. "How are we doing, sweetheart?" "Cold," I said. She went directly to a warmer in the corner and removed a heated blanket. She spread it across my chest with the practiced care of someone who does this not because it is in the protocol, but because she has decided it matters. The warmth arrived slowly, like something I had forgotten I was allowed to feel. "Your father and stepmother stepped out around an hour ago," she said, answering the question I hadn't yet formed. "They mentioned an errand. Your half-sister is being monitored in the transplant unit. Is there someone else I can contact for you?" "Megan Torres," I said, "my friend." Patricia moved toward the door, and then stopped and turned back. She looked at the empty chair. She looked at the paper cup on the tray with the bent straw. She looked at me. Then she opened my chart, took a yellow sticky note from her coat pocket, wrote something on it, and pressed it to the inside of the folder. From where I lay, I could read it clearly. It said, "PT post-op alone. No family support observed. Social work consult required immediately." She said, "Doctor, Caldwell will want to know about this." She closed the door softly, as if I were sleeping or grieving, both of which I would later understand were true. Down the hall, I heard the click of a phone camera, then another, then the bright, upward-inflected voice my stepmother used when she was recording content. They were already filming. I had not finished waking up. To understand my family as it was before my mother died, you have to understand what our house sounded like. My mother sang while she could. She played guitar on Sunday mornings with the back door open to the yard. She wrote songs on yellow legal pads at the kitchen table and read them aloud to me before she showed them to anyone else. She taught me to really listen to music, not just hear it.
The smell of her coffee in the morning and the sound of her guitar at night were the architecture of my childhood. They were the walls that held me up. She died in August of 2016. I was 18. She was 44. She had been sick for nearly 3 years and had refused to let anyone outside the immediate family understand how serious it was. She believed protecting the people she loved from grief was itself an act of love. She was mistaken about this, in ways I have spent years untangling. But I understood why she believed it, because she had taught me by example to absorb other people's pain before my own. Linda Hargrove reams of the funeral in a dress that was inappropriate in ways I couldn't then articulate and can now. She held my father's arm, she cried visibly, she kissed me on the forehead at the reception and said she would always be there. She was married to my father 11 months later, in our backyard, in a ceremony where I stood in the wedding party and smiled at a photographer while wearing a dress my mother would have diplomatically described as not quite right. That wedding photo became Linda's most engaged post for 2 consecutive years. My mother's sister, Aunt Claire, who had been my mother's closest friend and confidant for their entire adult lives, was not invited to the ceremony. She called me the night of the wedding. I sent it to voicemail. I regret that more than almost any other decision I have ever made. Linda's daughter Brianna had moved into our house at 13. She was already camera literate in ways that 13-year-olds should perhaps not be. She understood framing and light and the difference between a candid and a posed shot before she understood most things about other people. The first morning Linda lived with us, she came downstairs in my mother's gray cardigan and made coffee and said, "Carol wouldn't want things just sitting unused." I said nothing. By 2020, Linda had built her online brand around the story of a blended family healing together. The hashtag was #BlendedBlessings. The captions referenced my grace and resilience and open heart. Not one of those captions was shown to me before it was published. In September of 2023, I moved out. I rented a studio apartment in East Nashville and started building a freelance graphic design business. I thought I was free. I had only moved to a quieter part of the same trap. Here is something I did not learn until March of 2026, 6 weeks after surgery, when Megan and I began going back through the public archive of Linda Hargrove life with the methodical focus of 2 people who are no longer willing to be surprised. In August of 2025, 3 full months before Brianna was admitted to Vanderbilt with kidney failure, Linda had registered as an affiliate partner for a wellness supplement brand called Glow and Thrive. She had posted a celebration story. She had written, "So excited to share this new chapter. More details coming." In September, she had posted vague emotional stories about Brianna struggling, facing private battles, needing extra love. In November, Brianna was admitted to Vanderbilt and formally diagnosed. In December, a GoFundMe campaign launched for what Linda called the family's hardest season. By February, Linda's affiliate code, GTH20, was embedded in every post about Brianna's surgery and recovery. She had registered the code 3 months before her daughter was diagnosed. She had created the foundation of the story before she had a documented reason to tell it. Megan read that timeline twice and then sat back in her chair and said, very quietly, she rehearsed the grief before she had a victim. I wrote that sentence in my notebook. I underlined it twice. Now I need to tell you what actually happened at 2:14 in the afternoon on February 17th, 2026, in room 407 South of Vanderbilt Medical Center, so that you understand what Dr. Caldwell walked into. I had been awake for perhaps 90 minutes. The morphine drip was doing what morphine drips do. The room was quiet, except for the hum of medical equipment and the distant sound of Linda's performative camera voice somewhere down the hall. Then the door opened, the way it always opened when my father entered a room, too fast and not quite all the way, like he was testing the space before deciding to own it. He came in first. Linda was half a step behind him, phone already raised, red light already on. She said, "Babe, the light is better on this side," and he adjusted his position relative to my bed with the unconscious compliance of a man who has been managed so thoroughly that he believes the adjustments are his own idea. He was holding a black garbage bag in his right fist.
The bag was bunched tight at the top. Through the plastic, I could see the shapes of clothing and what looked like the corner of a receipt. He set it down on the floor beside my bed. He did not set it down gently. The sound of it hitting the floor was the sound of a decision that had been made long before he walked through that door. "You've done your part," he said. "Don't come home. We don't need you anymore." The morphine makes things arrive slowly, like sounds through water. I heard the words, but they took a moment to arrange themselves into meaning. When they did, I said through the rawness in my throat, "I just gave her my kidney." He laughed, the short, dismissive version. "That's the only valuable thing you ever had," he said. "Now you're useless." Linda had not lowered the phone. She was framing the shot. She adjusted slightly to include both my father's profile and the window behind him. She glanced at her screen to check the composition. My father turned toward the door. He said without looking back at me, "Brianna loves the bracelet, by the way. She cried when she saw it. She said it was the best gift she'd ever gotten." And then I understood completely. While I was on the operating table, my father and my stepmother had left this hospital. They had driven across Nashville to the Cartier boutique on West End Avenue. They had spent $9,200 on a diamond bangle, and they had called it a survivor gift. They had posted a photo of it to 291,000 people before I was moved out of the recovery bay. They had left me alone in the operating room, and they had left Brianna alone in the transplant unit, and they had gone to buy jewelry. The garbage bag was still on the floor beside my bed. Linda was still filming. My father pushed open the door and walked into the hallway. Linda took one more step to follow him, and Dr. Nathan Caldwell walked in. He had a manila folder in his right hand, and the controlled, deliberate energy of a man who had been standing in that hallway long enough to hear everything that had just happened in this room. He looked at my father's back. He said, "Mr. Mitchell, please stop walking. We need to discuss whose signature is on your daughter's consent documentation." The footsteps in the hallway stopped. Linda's phone dipped. I saw her glance at her screen and reach for the stop button. The red light went out, but the autosave on her editing app was still running, and it had captured everything. Dr. Caldwell did not conduct that conversation in my room. He stepped back into the hallway and asked my father and Linda to follow him to the consultation alcove near the nursing station. I could hear them through the half-open door. I could hear Dr. Caldwell's voice, level and precise, explaining that two versions of my donor information authorization existed in my file, that the signatures were not the same, that I had confirmed under separate documentation that I had not signed the February version, and that the matter had been formally reported to the hospital ethics committee as of that morning. I heard my father say there had been a clerical error. I heard Dr. Caldwell said that the term clerical error was not consistent with two documents bearing different signatures on the same form field. I heard Linda say something I could not fully make out, and I heard Dr. Caldwell say, "I am restricting information sharing on this patient to her designated emergency contact effective immediately. Have a good afternoon." Then I heard my father say, low and tight, "Let's go." Their footsteps moved away down the hall. Dr. Caldwell came back into my room. He closed the door. He sat down in the chair beside my bed, the empty chair that had been empty all afternoon, and he leaned forward slightly with his forearms on his knees. "Your vitals look good," he said. "How's the pain level?" "Manageable," I said. "I'm going to have your nurse check in, and the social work team will be here before the end of the day to talk about your discharge plan. You will not leave this hospital without a documented safe situation in place." I looked at the garbage bag still sitting on the floor beside my bed. He followed my gaze. He stood, carried the bag to the corner chair, and set it down without comment. Then he paused at the foot of my bed. "There's a receipt in there," I said, "from Cartier." He looked at me for a moment. "I know," he said. He left. Patricia Reeves came in shortly after and adjusted my morphine and brought me crushed ice in a fresh cup and said without looking directly at me, "The ethics committee will be reaching out to you in the next day or two, sweetheart. Answer when they call." That evening, Megan Torres drove from her apartment in Brentwood. She had already taken the next 2 days off from her job in healthcare administration. She had already booked a 2-bedroom rental in East Nashville in her own name for the following 6 weeks, because she had known without being told that my family would not provide a safe place for me to recover, and she had not waited to be asked. She showed me the Instagram story Linda had posted at 6:30 that evening. 14 seconds of edited footage. The garbage bag was gone. The word useless was gone. The cold laugh was gone. What remained was my father standing beside my bed, looking tired, saying simply, "You've done your part." Linda had added the caption, "A real moment, a real family, exhausted and grateful. #living donor, #blended blessings." It received 14,000 likes in 2 hours. In the comments, a small private account wrote, "Why is the donor never shown in any of your posts? Where is she?" That comment got 31 likes before Linda deleted it. Megan had already screenshotted it. The unedited footage from Linda's editing app was sitting in her iCloud autosave, where she had not yet thought to look. And Dr. Nathan Caldwell was sitting at his desk in his office, opening a new document and beginning to type. 2 days after surgery, Dr. Yvonne Harper from the ethics committee called me. She was a bioethicist with the careful, unhurried delivery of someone who understands that the most important thing she can do for a person in distress is to not rush them. She explained at the start of our call that her role was not to build a case against my family. Her role was to determine whether I had been able to make a free and genuinely informed decision to donate. "I am only asking about you," she said, "not about them. Do you understand that distinction?" We talked for 58 minutes. I told her about Sunday dinner in December. I told her about being called Cerber. I told her about the cocktail napkin with 3 handwritten lines and no date and no signature. I told her about sitting in my parking lot for 47 minutes in the dark, making a decision I believed was mine. I told her I had checked no coercion on the form and that I had believed it was true. She did not interrupt. When I finished, she said, "The box you checked is not invalidating it by what you've described." People in coercive situations very often check that box. That is precisely why we continue asking. Your statement will be added to your file, and with your permission, I would like to share it with Dr. Caldwell. I gave permission. She paused before the end of the call. "Miss Mitchell," she said, "you are not the first patient I have spoken with after a situation like the one you've described. I want you to know that." I cried for the first time since surgery, quietly with the phone against my ear. Patricia Reeves, who was changing my IV bag, noticed. She did not say anything. She just moved a little more quietly around the room. Megan drove me from Vanderbilt to the East Nashville rental on the morning of February 22nd. She had already stocked the refrigerator. She had loaded the car with extra pillows, my laptop, clothes she had retrieved from my apartment, and a hardcover notebook she bought at a bookstore on Fatherland Street. She handed it to me on the second morning. "You're going to need to write things down," she said. I did not write anything in it for 2 weeks. I slept, I healed, I watched the bruising on my left side change from purple to green to yellow. I followed the discharge instructions. I watched the ceiling. Megan brought me soup and refused to let me open Linda's social media profiles. On the night of March 6th, 16 days after surgery, I picked up the notebook for the first time. I wrote one line at the top of the first page. Things that do not match. Then I made a list. 1. Cartier bracelet, $9,200. Purchased at 10:41 a.m. on the day of surgery while I was on the table. 2. GoFundMe campaign, $334,000 raised since December. 3. Insurance covered 91% of total procedure costs. Vanderbilt billed me $7,100 out of pocket. The campaign raised more than 47 times my out-of-pocket cost. 4. Where is the $334,000? 5. Why did Linda register the Glow and Thrive affiliate code in August, before Brianna's November diagnosis? I looked at the list for a long time. Then I added a 6th item, because Megan had found it that afternoon while I was resting. 6. Robert Mitchell filed a tax deduction claim in January 2026 for a $41,000 charitable contribution to the Brianna Strong Fund. The Brianna Strong Fund was Linda's GoFundMe. He had donated $41,000 of crowd-funded public money back to his own family's campaign and claimed it as a charitable tax deduction. Megan sat on the floor of the bedroom that night with her laptop open and her spreadsheet pulled up. She looked at me and said, "This isn't carelessness. This is a structure. Someone thought this through." Megan had 4 columns in the spreadsheet: date, post, claimed narrative, documented reality. We spent 3 days going back through 19 months of Linda Hargrove life. We used the Wayback Machine for posts Linda had already deleted, of which there were now 27. Each deleted post was captured and dated in our archives. Each deletion was its own data point. By the end of 3 days, we had 61 rows. The row that stopped Megan mid-sentence and made her put down her coffee was about Brianna's diary. Here is the twist I did not see coming, and I want to be honest that I did not want it to be true. In the second week of March, I received a direct message from Brianna. We had not spoken in 12 weeks. It arrived at 11:40 at night. It said only, "Are you okay?" I did not answer immediately. She sent a message 10 minutes later. "Mom's been acting strange. She made me delete my Snapchat and my Be Real. I think she's scared of something. I found something I think you should see." She sent me a photo the next morning. It was a page from what appeared to be a personal journal, Brianna's handwriting, dated September 14th, 2025, 2 months before her diagnosis was formally made. The entry read, "Mom keeps saying I look thin on camera. She says the thinner I look, the more people will care.
She says the sicker I seem, the more we can build towards something real. I don't know what that means. I don't feel sick. My ankles have been swelling, though. Mom says it's nothing. She won't let me call the doctor." I read that page 4 times. Then I called Aunt Claire. Aunt Claire answered on the second ring. I had not called her in 6 years. She said, "Sarah," before I finished saying her name, the way people do when they have been waiting for a call that took a long time to arrive. "Aunt Claire," I said, "I think I made a mistake, a large one." "Tell me," she said. I told her about the kidney, about the garbage bag, about the cocktail napkin, about the Cartier bracelet and the GoFundMe numbers, about the affiliate code registered in August, about the tax deduction, about Brianna's journal entry. There was a silence that lasted long enough for me to count my own breaths. Then Aunt Claire said, "Sweetheart, your grandmother left you something. She gave me a box before she passed. She made me promise to keep it until you were ready to receive it. I have been waiting for you to call." She drove down from Knoxville 3 days later in a 20-year-old Subaru that smelled like cedar and dryer sheets. She carried a shoebox up the stairs of my rental with both hands, the way you carry something fragile or irreplaceable. She set it on the kitchen table. She opened the lid. On top of everything inside was a sealed envelope with my name on it in my grandmother Eleanor Mitchell's small, precise handwriting. It said, "For Sarah, when she's ready." I held it for a long time before I opened it. The letter was 2 pages, handwritten, dated April 29th, 2025, 3 months before my grandmother died. "Dear Sarah," it began, "I know your father has not been a real father to you for a long time. I know Linda has not been the mother she promised me she would be when she called me in 2017 to introduce herself and told me she would protect you. I told her then that the most important thing she could do for you was to make sure you kept your mother's things. I don't think she understood what I meant. I have left the Chattanooga house to you because that house was where your mother was happiest. She used to sit on the back porch and write songs while the sun went down over Lookout Mountain. She called it her thinking place. I want it to be your thinking place too. Don't let them take it from you. All my love, always, Gran." I cried into the letter. Megan put her hand on my shoulder and did not say anything. Under the letter were 2 documents. The first was my grandmother Eleanor's last will and testament, dated March 2025, and properly notarized, witnessed by her physician and her neighbor of 30 years, leaving the Chattanooga house and her savings to her granddaughter Sarah Caroline Mitchell. The second was a photocopy of an older, unfinalized draft document from 2014, written during a period when my grandmother had been briefly confused about her finances following a minor stroke. That draft left the Chattanooga house to my son-in-law, Robert Mitchell, in trust for the benefit of the family. The 2014 draft had never been notarized. It had never been witnessed by required parties. It had never been finalized into a legal instrument. But my father had submitted it to probate court 6 weeks after my grandmother died, presenting it as her current and binding will. The court had accepted the filing because no one had appeared to contest it. The Chattanooga house had sold on September 4th, 2025. The sale price was $610,000. The proceeds had gone into a joint account held by Robert and Linda Mitchell.
3 weeks after the sale closed, Linda had posted an unboxing video of a Louis Vuitton Capucines bag, retail value $11,500, with the caption, "Investing in myself after a really hard family season. You deserve beautiful things too. Hashtag self-care, hashtag treat yourself." The timeline was exact. The sale, then the bag, then the Glow and Thrive affiliate registration, then the vague illness posts, then the diagnosis, then the GoFundMe. Aunt Claire sat across from me at the kitchen table. She put her hand over mine. "Sweetheart," she said, "this is probate fraud. In Tennessee, this is a felony. There are people serving time in state corrections for exactly this." "I know," I said. "What do you want?" She asked me that directly, the way women in my mother's family always ask questions, without softening it into something easier to deflect. I thought about it. "I want everyone to know the truth," I said. "I want the story she has been telling about my family to be corrected by the actual facts."
Aunt Claire nodded once. "Then let's make sure the actual facts exist somewhere Linda can't delete them." On March 31st, I returned to Vanderbilt Medical Center for my 6-week donor follow-up appointment. Dr. Caldwell examined my incision site. He reviewed my labs. He told me everything was healing well and on schedule. Then he asked me to stay seated for a moment, and he went to his desk drawer and removed a manila folder. He opened it slowly, one page at a time. He showed me the 2 donor information authorization forms with signatures side by side. He showed me the Ethics Committee's final report. He showed me a timeline constructed from publicly available information, cross-referencing Linda's posts with county records and GoFundMe data and affiliate registration dates. He showed me the printout of the Chattanooga property deed transfer from Davidson County records. He showed me Patricia Reeves' signed witness statement, 3 paragraphs describing what she had observed in room 407 South on February 17th. Then he placed a final sheet on top. It had a name and a phone number. "This is Dana Voss," he said. "She is a media law attorney I trust. I have spoken with her, without using your name, about the broad structure of this situation. She is available to you." He closed the folder. He pushed it slightly toward me. "Miss Mitchell, I am bound by patient confidentiality regarding your sister's care. I cannot share her medical information with you. But everything in this folder is either your own documentation, public record, or witness statements I am legally authorized to share. None of it involves your sister's protected health information." I asked him why he had done all of this. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What would your mother have done?" I sat very still. I thought about my mother writing songs on the back porch of the Chattanooga house, with the sun going down behind the mountain. I thought about her reading me lyrics before she showed them to anyone else. I thought about her best friend at her funeral, holding my father's arm in a dress that was not appropriate. I said, "She would have made sure the truth existed somewhere." He nodded. "Then I think you already know your answer." I picked up the folder. I shook his hand. Neither of us said aloud what had just happened between us. We didn't need to. I sat in the Vanderbilt parking garage for 35 minutes. Then I called Megan. "I'm ready," I said. "For the video?" "Yes." Dana Voss met with Megan and me the following Saturday at her office on Charlotte Avenue. Aunt Claire joined by video call from Knoxville. We spread every document across Dana's conference table. She reviewed them for 85 minutes without speaking. Then she leaned back. "Truth is an absolute defense to defamation in Tennessee and under federal First Amendment doctrine," she said. "Every factual claim you intend to make is supported by documentation you physically possess. Your account of your own experience is protected speech. They will threaten legal action. They will not prevail." I said, "I'm not afraid of being sued. I'm afraid of being wrong." She looked at me carefully. "Those are 2 very different fears," she said, "and they speak well of you. But there is a third thing you need to consider before you record anything. Some people speak the truth publicly and feel free. Some people speak the truth publicly and find the silence that follows harder than the silence they were trying to break. You need to know which one you are." I thought about that for 8 days. By late April, Linda had begun quietly deleting posts from her archive. She removed 23 posts in 11 days. Megan had been archiving everything in real time. Each deletion was documented with a timestamp. Each one made our record stronger.
On the morning of April 28th, Megan texted me a photo of a locksmith's truck parked in front of my father and Linda's house in Franklin, the house I had grown up in, the house that had been my mother's. They were changing the locks on a house I had not lived in for 3 years and had not been welcome in for longer than that. That night, I opened a new document on my laptop. I started writing. It took me 5 nights to write 4 minutes of video. I rewrote the opening 14 times. I removed every adjective that was reaching for sympathy. I removed every sentence that explained how I felt before I had established what I knew. I kept only what I could prove and what I had lived. If this is your first time here, welcome to Story Sentence. If you've been here before, you already know that we tell real stories without flinching. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because what comes next in this story is something you will not want to miss. On Sunday night, May 3rd, at 1:22 in the morning, I sat on the bed in my East Nashville rental. The wall behind me was plain white. I was wearing a gray Belmont University t-shirt. My hair was pulled back. I had no filter, no music, no introduction. I set my phone on a small tripod on the dresser. On the nightstand beside me, visible in the frame, I placed the paper cup from Vanderbilt Medical Center, the one with the bent straw. The one I had brought home because it was the only thing in that room that had been placed there for me and not for an audience. I pressed record. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I am 26 years old. I live in East Nashville, Tennessee. On February 17th, 2026, I donated my left kidney to my half-sister Brianna. I am the woman my stepmother has been calling on her social media account, the Anonymous Angel. I never agreed to be anonymous.
I was never asked. My name is Sarah. This is what happened. I did not stop. I held up each document in turn, slowly, with the camera close enough to read the text. First, the screenshot of the Anonymous Angel post. I never consented to this language. I was never consulted. Second, the GoFundMe page showing $334,000 raised, placed beside the Vanderbilt billing summary, showing my $7,100 out-of-pocket cost. The campaign raised more than 47 times what my family needed to cover my costs. The remaining funds have not been publicly accounted for. Third, the Cartier receipt timestamped 10:41 a.m. on February 17th. While I was on the operating table, my father and stepmother left the hospital to purchase a $9,200 bracelet. This is the receipt. Fourth, the photograph of the black garbage bag on the floor of room 407 South. This is how my belongings were returned to me 3 hours after surgery, with the words, "You've done your part. You're useless."
Fifth, the Chattanooga property deed and my grandmother's 2 wills. My grandmother left her house to me in a notarized will dated March 2025. My father submitted a non-finalized 2014 draft to probate court 6 weeks after her death. The house sold for $610,000. 3 weeks later, my stepmother bought an $11,500 Louis Vuitton handbag and posted it to 291,000 followers as self-care. Sixth, the Glow and Glow affiliate registration dated August 2025. She registered this affiliate code 3 months before Brianna's diagnosis. I paused. I looked directly into the camera. I am not posting this for revenge, I said. I am posting this because for 9 years, my stepmother has been building a brand on a version of my life that erases me. I am posting this because when you use someone else's body to tell your story, that person eventually wakes up and remembers her own name. There is one more thing I need to show you. I clicked play on the audio clip. My father's voice came through the speaker, clear and unchanged. That's the only valuable thing you ever had. Now you're useless. I let the silence sit. Then I looked back at the camera. My name is Sarah Mitchell. My mother was Carol Mitchell. My grandmother was Eleanor Mitchell. I come from women who told the truth, even when it was expensive. This is the truth. Thank you for listening. I pressed stop. The video was 4 minutes and 19 seconds long. I uploaded it to Reddit under the title, "I'm the Anonymous Angel Donor from Linda Hargrove Life. I'm not anonymous anymore." I cross-posted to 3 additional communities. I uploaded the same video to TikTok under a new account in my legal name. Then I put my phone face down on the nightstand beside the paper cup. I went to sleep. Megan was sitting on the floor with her back against the wall, watching the upload complete. She watched the first comment arrive at 1:51 a.m. It said, "I have followed this account for 2 years.
I bought the supplements. I am so sorry." Megan turned off her own phone. She lay down on the couch. We both slept. By Monday morning at 9, the TikTok video had 5.2 million views. By Monday at noon, the hashtag #AnonymousAngelHasAname was trending at number 4 nationally. By Monday evening, my message inbox had 3,100 unread messages. Megan read them. She flagged the journalists, the documentary producers, the other living donors who had reached out with stories so similar to mine that reading their summaries felt like reading drafts of my own account. She flagged the women who said they had been quietly uneasy about Linda Hargrove life for years without being able to name exactly why. She flagged the message from a woman who identified herself only as a former employee of the Glow and Thrive brand, who said she had information about the timeline of the campaign that she wanted to share with my attorney. On Tuesday morning, Vanderbilt Medical Center released a public statement. Vanderbilt Medical Center takes all concerns regarding the integrity of our living donor consent process with the utmost seriousness. We are conducting a comprehensive internal review. The well-being and autonomy of every donor who entrusts us with their care remains our highest priority. Dr. Nathan Caldwell had moved that statement through the ethics board in under 72 hours. By Tuesday afternoon, Glow and Thrive had terminated its partnership with Linda Hargrove Life, citing values alignment. By Tuesday evening, 34 additional brand partners had quietly unfollowed or untagged Linda's account. By Wednesday morning, the Brianna Strong GoFundMe had been paused by the platform, pending an internal fraud review and the possible initiation of donor refund processes. The follower count on Linda Hargrove Life began to drop: 291,000, then 254,000, then 201,000, then 148,000. By the following Friday, she had lost 229,000 followers in 8 days. What remained was 62,000, a fraction of what she had built her professional identity around for 5 years. My father did not lose his position at AutoNation Group immediately, but the regional management transferred him from the Franklin Mercedes dealership, which had been built on the patronage of women in their 40s and 50s who comprised Linda's core demographic, to a lower-volume fleet sales position in Murfreesboro. The Franklin Mercedes store reported a 55% drop in showroom traffic over the following 6 weeks. The afternoon Vanderbilt released its statement, Linda called me 11 times. I did not answer once. Her text messages began with, "Honey, we can fix this," and ended 9 messages later with, "You have burned down everything I built." I did not read past the third. Megan read the rest and gave me a brief clinical summary. On the morning of May 9th, Brianna boarded a flight at Nashville International Airport bound for Denver, Colorado. The eating disorder treatment center she was entering, the Eating Recovery Center on East 17th Avenue, had been identified by Vanderbilt's transplant team during postoperative care. The ethics committee, working in conjunction with Vanderbilt's social work department, had made clear that continued post-transplant medical support for Brianna was contingent on her access to specialized treatment, that Linda, for reasons that were now a matter of professional documentation, had been actively preventing. The public attention surrounding the story had accelerated a process that might otherwise have taken months. Brianna walked to the gate with a single rolling carry-on suitcase. Not a garbage bag, I noticed. From the gate, she sent me a text. It said, "Thank you for not lying for them anymore. You didn't have to tell the truth. You did it anyway." I read it twice. I typed back, "Get well. We'll figure out the rest later. There's no rush." She sent back a single emoji. A small white flower. I don't know why that particular one, but I kept it. By the 3rd week of May, I had received more than 5,500 collaboration and partnership inquiries from podcasts, brands, journalists, production companies, documentary filmmakers, and advocacy organizations. I declined nearly all of them. The one I did not decline was an email from a Nashville-based nonprofit called Donor First, which worked specifically on living donor rights and informed consent reform. They asked whether I would be willing to serve on an advisory panel for a national awareness campaign. I said yes. I attended the first meeting via video call from a folding chair in my new studio space on Gallatin Avenue in East Nashville, which I had signed a lease on the previous week, under my full legal name, Sarah Caroline Mitchell.
I had named the studio Carol and Daughter.
I gave it my mother's name because her name had been borrowed and rearranged and filtered through someone else's aesthetic for 9 years, and it deserved to exist somewhere real, attached to something that she would have recognized as good. Aunt Claire drove down from Knoxville for the day the studio sign was installed. She brought something from the back of her Subaru wrapped in a moving blanket, something she had retrieved from my father's garage in Franklin during the week he and Linda had vacated the house and the property management company was conducting an inventory. It was a painting. My mother had made it on the back porch of the Chattanooga house, the house my grandmother left me and my father sold, years before any of this. It showed the view looking east toward Lookout Mountain at late afternoon, the sky that specific shade of amber that only exists for about 12 minutes on October evenings in Tennessee. My mother had mixed those colors by hand.
I recognized them instantly. We hung it on the back wall of Carol and Daughter. Beside it, we framed the letter from my grandmother. Below both of them, we hung my official living donor certificate from Vanderbilt Medical Center, my full legal name printed across the top in formal type. On the desk below the paintings, in the spot where I would sit every morning when I came in, I placed the paper cup from the hospital, the one with the bent straw, the one that had been the only thing in that room that was meant for me. Inside the cup, I planted a small hen and chick succulent that Megan had picked up at a farmer's market on Fifth Avenue the week before. It needed almost no water. It would spread slowly over time, quietly colonizing whatever space it was given, unbothered. On the morning the studio sign went up, a woman pushing a stroller stopped on the sidewalk outside and looked through the glass at the paintings on the back wall. She stood there for a moment.
Then she looked at the name on the window, Carol and Daughter, and she smiled, the small, private smile that people make when something makes unexpected sense to them. She did not know whose name it was. She did not need to. She just smiled and moved on down the sidewalk, and I stood behind the desk and watched her go. And I thought, that is enough. That is exactly enough. Here is what I want to say before I close. Some families do not love you. They appraise you. They calculate what you can provide, and they schedule the extraction, and they hand you a garbage bag when the account is empty. They put your body in their fundraising campaigns and your name in their captions, and they call you anonymous when anonymity serves them, and they call you family when family is a useful word, and they leave you alone in an operating room and go buy jewelry. They are not rare. They are not unusual. They are not the worst thing a person can survive. You are not a yield. You are not a supply line.
You are not a story someone else gets to tell about their own bravery. You are a person with a name and a history, and a grandmother who kept a shoebox for you in her spare bedroom because she knew the time would come. The receipts are always somewhere. They are in county deed records. They are in iCloud autosaves. They are in the manila folder of a transplant surgeon who had the decency to sit down next to you in the pre-op bay and ask whether you were okay. They are in the sticky note a recovery room nurse pressed to the inside of your chart at 3 p.m. on the worst day of your life. They are in the attic, in a shoebox wrapped in a moving blanket, addressed to you in your grandmother's handwriting. Find them. Keep them. Speak clearly. You do not need to perform this. You do not need to be spectacular about it. You only need to say what is true, with documentation, in your own name, to an audience that was always yours and never belonged to the person who thought they had earned it by building a following. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I am 26 years old. I come from women who told the truth, even when it was expensive. My grandmother kept a letter for me for 2 years. My aunt drove 4 hours to bring it. My friend booked a rental before I asked her to. A surgeon sat down next to me in the dark, and a nurse wrote 4 words on a sticky note that changed the direction of everything. If any part of this story sounds like your own life, please leave a comment. Tell me what you came from. Tell me what you are building. The comments under this video have become, in the past several weeks, the most honest room I have ever stood in. You will not be alone there. If this is your first time on Story Sentence, please subscribe and turn on notifications. There is more to tell, and we will tell all of it.
If someone you know needs to hear this story, share it with them. You might be the Megan Torres in somebody else's parking lot. You might be the sticky note somebody needs. The succulent on my desk will bloom in late summer. The painting on the wall is still the color my mother mixed by hand on a back porch in Chattanooga 30 years ago. And my name, my full name, is on the lease of a studio that belongs to no one but me. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I am not anonymous anymore, and I am just getting started.